I'm Isabella Rodriguez, 24 years old, and 4 months ago, my grandfather, Vincent Romano, left me his $85 million restaurant empire in his will. What should have been the beginning of an incredible journey quickly turned into a nightmare when my stepmother Patricia and her son Derek launched a vicious campaign to steal everything from me. I never thought the people who raised me would become my worst enemies, especially after everything Grandpa Vincent had taught me about loyalty and hard work. But when they tried to force me to sign over my inheritance, Grandpa's attorney smiled in a way that made Patricia's face turn white with fear. If you're reading this, please share your thoughts in the comments and let me know where you're from. I promise this story of family greed, corporate manipulation, and sweet justice will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very end. To understand why Grandpa Vincent chose me as his heir, you need to know our family's complicated history. I was raised by my grandfather after my mother, Maria, died in a car accident when I was 11. My father, Antonio, Vincent's only son, had always been weak-willed and easily influenced. When he remarried Patricia just 2 years after my mother's death, everything changed. Isabella needs a mother figure, my father would say whenever I complained about Patricia's cold treatment. But she never wanted to be my mother. She wanted to be the wife of a wealthy man's son, positioning herself to inherit everything. Vincent Romano was a legend in the restaurant industry. He had started Romano's Kitchen in 1975 with nothing but a small storefront in Brooklyn, authentic Italian recipes from his mother, and an unshakable work ethic. What began as a neighborhood trattoria had grown into a chain of 47 upscale Italian restaurants across the East Coast, worth $85 million by the time I graduated college. Despite his massive success, Grandpa remained humble and connected to his roots. "Money doesn't make you better than anyone, Isabella," he'd tell me while we prepped vegetables together in his original Brooklyn location. "It just gives you more responsibility to do good in the world." After my mother's death, I spent every weekend and school vacation working alongside Grandpa in his restaurants. While other kids my age were at summer camps or hanging out at malls, I was learning every aspect of the business, from washing dishes and seating customers to managing inventory and understanding profit margins. By 15, I was helping create new menu items. By 17, I was training new servers. By 19, I was assisting with location scouting for new restaurants. The staff watched me grow up, and many became like family. I studied hospitality management and business at Cornell, working at different Romano's locations every break. Grandpa never pressured me to join the family business, but his eyes lit up whenever I showed enthusiasm for it. "You have your mother's heart for people and my head for business," he'd say. "That's what this industry really needs." Meanwhile, my stepmother Patricia had been positioning herself and her son Derek to inherit the empire. Patricia had married my father 3 years after divorcing her first husband, bringing along Derek, who was 2 years older than me. She was beautiful, manipulative, and had expensive tastes that my father's modest income as a middle manager couldn't satisfy. Derek had grudgingly worked at Romano's during summers, but he was more interested in the prestige and money than the actual work. He saw the restaurant business as beneath him, often complaining about the smell of garlic and dealing with demanding customers. He'd graduated with a business degree but had no real passion for hospitality. "Vincent is getting old," Patricia would whisper to my father during family dinners, not caring if I overheard. "Derek has been working hard to prove himself. He deserves to take over the business, not some girl who's still in college." What Patricia didn't understand was that Vincent had been carefully observing all of us for years, watching how we treated employees, handled responsibility, and understood the values that had built Romano's Kitchen. The tension reached a breaking point 8 months before Grandpa's death. He had been battling prostate cancer for a year, though he'd kept his diagnosis private from most of the family. During what would be his final Thanksgiving dinner, Derek couldn't contain his impatience any longer. "Grandpa, we need to discuss the future of Romano's," he announced over dessert, his voice carrying across the dining room. "I've been thinking about some changes we could make to increase profitability. Maybe streamline the menu, reduce portion sizes, cut some of the more expensive ingredients." Vincent's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Cut expenses by reducing quality?" That goes against everything Romano's Kitchen stands for, Derek. Our reputation is built on authentic ingredients and generous portions. That's old-school thinking, Grandpa. Patricia interjected, despite having no experience in the restaurant industry. There's so much money being wasted on unnecessary premium ingredients. Look at what other restaurant chains are doing with cost optimization. I watched Grandpa's jaw clench. He'd spent 45 years building Romano's reputation for quality and authenticity. The answer is no, Vincent said firmly. Romano's Kitchen will never sacrifice quality for profit. Derek's face flushed red. When are you going to admit that you need to step back and let the next generation modernize this business? I'm not getting any younger, and I've earned the right to lead this company. Have you? Grandpa asked quietly, his voice dangerously calm. Because from where I sit, you've been going through the motions while Isabella has been learning this business with genuine passion and respect for our customers. The comparison stung Derek visibly. He stood up abruptly, throwing his napkin on the table. Come on, Mom. We don't have to listen to this favoritism. After they stormed out, Grandpa turned to me with sadness in his eyes. I'm afraid Derek doesn't understand that respect is earned, not inherited. That was the last civil conversation I witnessed between Grandpa and Patricia's family until his funeral 4 months later. Vincent's death came suddenly, despite his illness. He passed away peacefully in his sleep on a Sunday morning in January. The funeral was held at St. Anthony's Cathedral in Brooklyn, with hundreds of attendees including restaurant industry leaders, loyal employees, and neighborhood families who had been coming to Romano's for decades. Patricia and Derek sat in the front row with my father and me, but I could feel their anticipation radiating throughout the service. My father, devastated by losing his father, held my hand as we listened to touching tributes to Vincent's generosity, integrity, and impact on the community. The will reading was scheduled for the following Wednesday at the offices of Morrison and Associates, Vincent's law firm. The family gathered in a conference room overlooking the East River. Myself, my father, Patricia, Derek, and Vincent's sister Rosa, who had moved to Florida years ago and rarely visited. Thomas Morrison, Vincent's longtime attorney, looked solemn as he opened the will. Vincent was very deliberate about his final wishes, he began. He spent considerable time ensuring that his legacy would continue according to his values. The room was thick with tension as Thomas began reading. Vincent had left generous bequests to longtime employees, substantial donations to culinary schools, and college funds for employees' children. But when it came to Romano's Kitchen itself, his decision was unambiguous. To my beloved granddaughter, Isabella Rodriguez, who has shown not only exceptional talent and dedication but also a true understanding of what Romano's Kitchen represents, I leave controlling interest in Romano's Kitchen, comprising 70% of company shares, along with all related assets, properties, and intellectual property. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat frozen, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I'd just inherited. An $85 million restaurant empire was now my responsibility. Derek erupted first. This is insane. I've worked at those restaurants for years. I'm his step-grandson. Vincent, please continue reading, my father said quietly, though his eyes were wide with shock. Thomas continued. To my step-grandson, Derek Patterson, I leave 10% of Romano's Kitchen shares and a position on the board of directors. To my daughter-in-law, Patricia Patterson, I leave 5% of shares. To my son, Antonio Rodriguez, I leave 10% of shares and the family home in Staten Island. To my sister, Rosa Romano, I leave 5% of shares. Patricia's face was flushed with rage. This is completely unfair. Derek has seniority and a business degree. Isabella is barely out of college. Actually, Thomas interjected. Vincent included a letter explaining his decision. Would you like me to read it? I nodded, though my hands were shaking. Thomas cleared his throat and began reading Grandpa's words. I know this decision may surprise some family members, but it shouldn't surprise anyone who has been paying attention. For the past 10 years, I have watched Isabella demonstrate not only exceptional business acumen but also the heart and integrity necessary to preserve Romano's Kitchen's legacy. She understands that we are not just serving food, but creating experiences that bring families together and preserve Italian-American traditions. The letter continued. Derek, you have potential, but you have never understood the soul of this business. Your focus on cost-cutting over quality would ultimately destroy what we've spent decades building. I hope you will support Isabella and learn from her passion for hospitality. Derek stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Grandpa was clearly not thinking straight. A 24-year-old cannot run a company of this size. Vincent's mental capacity was thoroughly evaluated by medical professionals, Thomas said firmly. This will is completely legally sound and reflects his true wishes. Over the next hour, Thomas explained the details of the inheritance. While I owned 70% of the company, giving me controlling interest, there were stipulations designed to ensure a smooth transition. I would work closely with the existing management team for the first year, and any major structural changes would require board approval. As the meeting concluded, Patricia cornered me in the hallway. Isabella, you have to know this is a mistake. You're not ready for this responsibility. Let Derek help you. He can manage the business side while you learn. Her tone was condescending, and I could see Derek behind her, his eyes calculating. Thank you for the offer, but I think I can handle it. Think about it, Derek added, his voice falsely friendly. You don't want to ruin Grandpa's legacy by making inexperienced decisions. The restaurant industry is brutal. One wrong move, and you could lose everything. I walked away without responding, but their words planted seeds of doubt. Was I really ready for this enormous responsibility? The first month after inheriting Romano's kitchen was overwhelming. The restaurant industry buzzed with speculation about whether Vincent's young granddaughter could successfully lead such an established chain. Some trade publications ran articles questioning my experience, while others expressed cautious optimism about fresh leadership bringing innovation to a traditional brand. I moved into Vincent's office at the corporate headquarters in Manhattan, a warm space filled with family photos, vintage restaurant equipment, and framed reviews from food critics spanning 4 decades. Sitting behind his oak desk, surrounded by the history of Romano's kitchen, I felt both inspired and terrified. The management team was supportive but watchful. Elena Rossi, our corporate chef who had worked with Vincent for 15 years, became my closest advisor. Michael Chun, our CFO, helped me navigate the complex financial aspects of running a restaurant chain. Sarah Williams, our director of operations, guided me through the challenges of managing 47 locations across multiple states. Your grandfather spent 45 years building this company, Elena told me during one of our daily meetings. Don't feel like you need to revolutionize everything immediately. Learn, listen, and trust the instincts he helped you develop. But Derek wasn't making the transition easy. As a board member and 10% shareholder, he had legitimate grounds to attend board meetings and request operational reports. However, he was using his position to question every decision I made and subtly undermine my authority with other shareholders and management. During my first board meeting, when I presented plans to expand our catering services and develop a line of Romano's branded sauces for retail, Derek immediately objected. These initiatives sound expensive and risky, he said, looking around the table at the other board members. Shouldn't we focus on optimizing our existing operations rather than experimenting with unproven ventures? The restaurant industry is evolving rapidly, I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. If we don't diversify our revenue streams and adapt to changing consumer preferences, we'll lose market share to more innovative competitors. Patricia, who had somehow convinced Derek to bring her to the meeting as his business advisor, spoke up. With respect, Isabella, you're talking about spending millions on untested initiatives. That seems irresponsible for someone so new to leadership. The other board members looked uncomfortable with the family tension, but I could see doubt creeping into their expressions. Was I being too ambitious too quickly? Over the next several weeks, Derek escalated his campaign. He started scheduling private meetings with key managers, ostensibly to support the transition but actually to plant seeds of doubt about my leadership capabilities. He questioned my decisions to longtime suppliers, suggesting that the company might be more stable under more experienced management. The breaking point came during our quarterly review meeting. I had prepared a comprehensive presentation showing strong sales figures, positive customer feedback on our new seasonal menu items, and promising early results from our catering expansion. But Derek interrupted before I could finish. I've been receiving concerns from several key suppliers, he announced, pulling out a folder. Food distributors are questioning whether Romano's Kitchen can maintain its standards under such inexperienced leadership. He read from what he claimed were emails from concerned vendors, though he wouldn't show me the actual correspondence. Our main produce supplier is considering reducing our credit terms. Our seafood distributor is expressing concerns about our upcoming summer menu. These are relationships that took decades to build. I felt my confidence wavering as other board members exchanged worried glances. I haven't heard any of these concerns directly, I said weakly. Because they're coming to me, Derek replied smugly. I have long-standing relationships with these suppliers. They're more comfortable expressing concerns to someone with my experience. Sarah Williams, our operations director, looked confused. I spoke with our produce supplier just yesterday. They mentioned being excited about our farm-to-table initiative. Derek waved dismissively. Sarah, you're hearing what they want you to hear. I'm getting the real feedback behind the scenes. The meeting ended with the board requesting that I work more closely with Derek on major decisions, effectively giving him veto power over my initiatives. I left feeling defeated and questioning whether I was truly capable of leading the company. That evening, I called my father, who had been staying at Vincent's Staten Island house, trying to process his grief and sort through decades of family memories. Dad, I don't think I can do this, I admitted, tears streaming down my face. Maybe Derek is right. Maybe I'm too young and inexperienced. My father was quiet for a long moment. Isabella, your grandfather chose you for a reason. He saw something in you that maybe you don't even see in yourself yet. But what if I fail? What if I destroy everything he built? Then you'll learn from your mistakes and build something even better, he said, his voice stronger than I'd heard it in months. Your grandfather didn't become successful by playing it safe. He took risks, trusted his instincts, and never let anyone convince him he wasn't good enough. His words helped, but I still felt overwhelmed by the pressure and Derek's constant undermining. What I didn't know was that Vincent had anticipated this exact scenario and had put safeguards in place that would soon turn the tables completely. The crisis escalated dramatically 3 weeks later. I arrived at the corporate office Monday morning to find security guards at the elevator, preventing me from accessing the executive floors. I'm sorry, Ms. Rodriguez, the head of security said apologetically. I have orders from Mr. Derek Patterson that access to the executive offices is restricted pending a board review of company leadership. I was stunned. He can't do that. I own 70% of this company. Ma'am, I'm just following the instructions I was given. You'll need to speak with Mr. Patterson about this. I found Derek in Vincent's office, my office, sitting behind the oak desk as if he belonged there. Patricia was there too, going through Vincent's personal files with disturbing familiarity. What is this? I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. Derek looked up calmly. Isabella, we need to talk. The board has serious concerns about your leadership, and several major suppliers have threatened to terminate their contracts if changes aren't made immediately. That's not true, I said firmly. I want to see documentation of these supplier concerns. Patricia laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the office walls. Sweetie, you're in over your head. This company needs experienced leadership, not someone playing restaurant owner as a hobby. I am the owner, I stated flatly. Vincent left me controlling interest in this company. Controlling interest doesn't mean you can run it into the ground, Derek replied, standing up and moving around the desk toward me. The board has voted to implement emergency leadership protocols. I'm taking over as interim CEO while we assess the situation. I felt like the world was spinning around me. The board can't just remove me. I own 70% of the shares. Actually, Patricia said, pulling out a thick legal document, under the corporate bylaws, if the board determines that current leadership poses a risk to the company's financial stability, they can implement interim management pending a full review. I stared at the papers, my mind racing. This is impossible. Thomas Morrison would never have allowed bylaws that could circumvent Vincent's wishes. Derek's expression became pitying. Isabella, Thomas Morrison is 82 years old. He's been having some health issues lately. The board has been working with a more current legal team to ensure the company's protection. The implication hit me like a physical blow. They were suggesting that Vincent's longtime attorney was incompetent and that his will might be questionable. It was a calculated attack designed to undermine everything. "You're lying," I whispered, but doubt was creeping in. Had I missed something? Were there really concerns about Thomas's competency? "Look," Derek said, his voice becoming gentler, more patronizing. "We're family. I don't want to hurt you. Accept the interim arrangement, let me stabilize the company, and then we can discuss a gradual transition back to your leadership once you've gained more experience." I looked around the office, Vincent's office, seeing his photos, his awards, his lifetime of work being casually appropriated by people who had never understood his vision. "No," I said quietly, then louder. "No. This is my company. Vincent left it to me, and I won't let you steal it." Patricia rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Isabella. We're trying to help you." "Get out of my office," I said, my voice growing stronger. "Both of you." Derek's fake sympathy evaporated. "You don't have an office anymore. Security will escort you out. We'll be in touch through our attorneys about your role going forward." As I was escorted from the building by security guards, people who had known me since I was a teenager, I felt humiliated and defeated. Employees whispered as I passed, some looking sympathetic, but others seeming to accept that maybe Derek was right. Maybe I wasn't ready for this responsibility. Outside on the Manhattan street, I stood looking up at the Romano's Kitchen corporate headquarters, watching Derek and Patricia through the office windows, and felt more alone than I had since my mother died. But what I didn't know was that Vincent had anticipated exactly this scenario, and his real protections were about to be revealed. I spent that first night in a hotel room, afraid to go back to my apartment in case Derek had somehow gained access to that too. I felt paranoid and desperate, unsure who I could trust or what legal recourse I might have. The next morning, I called Thomas Morrison's office, terrified that Derek might be right about his mental capacity. But when Thomas's assistant put me through, his voice was sharp and alert. "Isabella, my dear, I've been expecting your call. I assume Derek has made his move. Mr. Morrison, they're saying you've been having health problems, that the will might not be valid." Thomas's laugh interrupted me. "My health is fine, and Vincent's will is absolutely ironclad. In fact, he anticipated this exact situation. Can you come to my office this afternoon? There are some things you need to know." Relief flooded through me. "Yes, of course. But Mr. Morrison, they've locked me out of the company. They're claiming the board voted to remove me." "Interesting," Thomas said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Very interesting indeed. I'll see you at 3 p.m. Thomas's office was in a classic Manhattan brownstone, his walls lined with law books and photographs of Vincent from various points in his career. When I arrived, he was waiting with several thick folders spread across his conference table. "Sit down, Isabella," he said warmly. "Your grandfather was one of the most astute businessmen I've ever known. Did you really think he'd leave you vulnerable to the kind of corporate coup Derek is attempting?" He opened the first folder, revealing documents I'd never seen before. What Derek doesn't know is that Vincent restructured the corporate bylaws 8 months before his death. The old bylaws he's referencing were superseded by new ones that I filed personally. I leaned forward, studying the documents. "What do they say?" "They say," Thomas continued with satisfaction, "that any attempt to remove the majority shareholder as CEO requires a unanimous vote of all board members plus written consent from at least 75% of shareholders. Since you control 70% of the shares and Derek only has 10%, such removal is mathematically impossible." My heart started beating faster. So Derek's board vote isn't valid? Not only invalid, but what he's done constitutes corporate usurpation, which is both a civil and criminal matter. Thomas's eyes were twinkling now. But that's not the best part. He opened another folder, revealing financial documents. Vincent also established a specific clause regarding hostile internal actions. If any family member attempts to unlawfully seize control of the company, their shares are automatically forfeited and redistributed to the rightful CEO. I stared at the papers in disbelief. You mean Derek's 10% stake is now yours, along with Patricia's 5%. Thomas's smile was predatory. Your grandfather was very thorough. He'd been watching Derek's behavior for years and suspected he might try something like this. The implications were staggering. Not only was I still the rightful CEO, but Derek had just handed me his entire stake in the company through his illegal actions. There's more, Thomas continued, opening a third folder. Vincent had Derek and Patricia investigated after their behavior at Thanksgiving dinner. What we found was quite revealing. The folder contained financial records, background checks, and legal documents showing Derek's history of failed business ventures funded by Patricia's manipulation of previous relationships, Patricia's pattern of marrying wealthy men and positioning herself for inheritance claims, and evidence of both of them attempting to access Vincent's personal accounts during his final illness. "This is incredible," I whispered, scanning through the evidence. "How did Grandpa manage all this?" "Your grandfather spent his final months making sure you'd be protected," Thomas explained. "He knew Derek would challenge the will, and he prepared accordingly. He also left you one more surprise." He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Vincent's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a letter that brought tears to my eyes. "My dearest Isabella," it began. "If you're reading this, it means Derek has shown his true colors and tried to steal what rightfully belongs to you. Don't be surprised, and don't be discouraged. This is simply his final test, and your opportunity to prove you have the strength to protect what we've built together." The letter continued, "I've given you all the tools you need to not only defeat his challenge, but to emerge stronger than before. Trust in yourself, trust in Thomas, and remember that sometimes the people who try to tear you down are actually giving you the chance to show the world what you're truly made of." It concluded, "You are my heir not because of blood, but because of character. Now go show them what a Romano woman can do when she's been pushed too far." Thomas was watching my face as I read. "Your grandfather's final instruction was that you shouldn't just regain control of the company. You should do it in a way that makes it clear to everyone that you're not a child to be manipulated, but a leader to be respected." "What did he have in mind?" I asked, feeling a familiar fire beginning to build in my chest. Thomas's smile turned wolfish. "He wanted you to call an emergency board meeting and retake control publicly. But first, we're going to make sure Derek and Patricia face the full consequences of their actions." Over the next 2 hours, Thomas outlined Vincent's comprehensive plan for my corporate restoration. It was elegant, devastating, and completely legal. By the time we finished, I understood why Vincent had been such a formidable businessman. He hadn't just anticipated Derek's betrayal, he'd prepared to use it as the foundation for my definitive establishment as CEO. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Friday morning in Romano's Kitchen's main conference room. Derek had sent out the invitations, intending to formalize his takeover and possibly discuss selling the company to one of several restaurant conglomerates he'd been secretly courting. I arrived early with Thomas, taking seats at the far end of the conference table. Derek and Patricia entered together, both looking confident and self-satisfied. The other board members filed in, looking uncomfortable with the family drama, but clearly feeling they had to choose sides. Derek called the meeting to order, standing at the head of the table. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, we're facing a critical transition period, and difficult decisions need to be made for the good of the company." He outlined his vision for Romano's Kitchen, which involved cost-cutting measures, menu simplification, and ultimately selling to a larger restaurant group. Everything Vincent had fought against. "I've received preliminary offers from 3 major restaurant corporations," he announced. "The highest bid is $95 million, which represents a significant premium over our current valuation." Gasps echoed around the table. Patricia smiled triumphantly, clearly envisioning her share of that windfall. "Of course," Derek continued, "this requires unified leadership and an end to the uncertainty that's been plaguing the company." He looked directly at me. "Isabella, I hope you'll see that this is the best outcome for everyone. You'll receive fair compensation for your shares, and the Romano legacy will continue under more stable ownership." I stood up slowly, feeling every eye in the room turn to me. "Derek, Thank you for that fascinating presentation. There's just one small problem with your plan. His confidence faltered slightly. What do you mean? I nodded to Thomas, who began distributing folders to each board member. The problem is that everything you've done over the past week is completely illegal. The room erupted in confused murmurs as board members opened their folders. Inside were copies of the updated corporate bylaws, documentation of Derek's illegal seizure of control, and evidence of his attempts to sell company assets without proper authorization. Ladies and gentlemen, I continued, my voice growing stronger. You're looking at proof that Derek Patterson has committed corporate usurpation, fraud, and attempted theft of company assets. Under New York corporate law and our specific bylaws, these actions automatically forfeit his shares and board position. Derek had gone pale. This is ridiculous. You can't possibly. Furthermore, I interrupted, Patricia Patterson has been using privileged access to company information for personal gain and has attempted to manipulate board decisions through fraudulent documentation. I turned to address the room. My grandfather, Vincent Romano, anticipated this exact scenario. He updated our corporate bylaws 8 months before his death specifically to prevent hostile internal takeovers. Every action Derek has taken has been not only illegal but ineffective. Thomas stood up, his voice carrying the authority of decades of legal experience. The emergency vote that supposedly removed Isabella as CEO never actually occurred because proper notice wasn't given and a quorum wasn't present. The bylaws Derek cited were superseded months ago. And most importantly, as majority shareholder with 70% ownership, Isabella cannot be removed as CEO without her own consent. The board members were frantically reading through the documents, their faces showing increasing alarm as they realized the magnitude of Derek's deception. Patricia jumped to her feet. This is obviously fabricated. You can't prove any of this. Actually, we can, I replied calmly. I nodded to Thomas, who produced another folder. We have recorded conversations of Derek promising to sell company information to potential buyers, financial records showing Patricia's attempted manipulation of company accounts, and security footage of both of you accessing restricted areas without authorization. Derek was now visibly sweating. Even if all this is true, the company needs experienced leadership. The board has legitimate concerns. The board, interrupted Maria Santos, our longest-serving independent director, was never consulted about these concerns. Derek, you've lied to all of us. One by one, the other board members expressed their shock and support for my restoration as CEO. It became clear that Derek had manipulated each of them individually, making them believe the others supported his coup, when in reality, none of them had. The question now, I said, looking around the table, is what we do next. I could have Derek and Patricia arrested for their crimes. I could sue them for damages to the company's reputation. Or, I paused, letting the tension build. Or I can offer them a choice. Leave quietly, forfeit any claim to Romano's kitchen, and face no criminal charges. But if you ever attempt to interfere with this company again, or if you try to damage our reputation, I will pursue every legal remedy available. Derek looked around the room desperately, seeing no support anywhere. Isabella, we're family. Surely we can work something out. Family, I repeated, thinking of Vincent's letter. Family doesn't try to destroy each other's life's work for personal gain. Patricia tried one last desperate gambit. The restaurant industry will never respect a 24-year-old CEO. You'll run this company into the ground within a year. I smiled, feeling completely calm for the first time in weeks. Patricia, you're absolutely right that I have a lot to learn. But I have something you and Derek will never have. I understand what Romano's Kitchen actually stands for. I know the difference between building something and just exploiting it. The meeting concluded with a unanimous vote restoring me as CEO and removing Derek from the board. Security escorted him and Patricia from the building, this time permanently. As the other board members filed out, many stopping to offer their support and apologize for being manipulated, I remained seated at the conference table with Thomas. How do you feel? He asked. I considered the question carefully. Stronger, I said finally. Grandpa was right. This wasn't just an attack, it was a test. and I think I passed. Thomas smiled. Vincent would be very proud. You didn't just survive Derek's betrayal, you emerged from it as a true leader. Over the next month, I focused on rebuilding relationships within the company and with our suppliers. The truth about Derek's deception had spread quickly through the industry, and rather than damaging my reputation, the way I'd handled the crisis had actually enhanced it. The annual Restaurant Industry Awards were approaching, and I decided to use the event as an opportunity to make a definitive statement about Romano's Kitchen's future under my leadership. I announced that we would be launching the Vincent Romano Legacy Initiative, featuring sustainable sourcing, expanded employee benefits, and a scholarship program for aspiring chefs from underprivileged backgrounds. The initiative was everything Derek had said we couldn't afford: expensive, idealistic, and focused on values over pure profit. The announcement was made at our flagship Brooklyn location, the same small storefront where Vincent had started 45 years earlier. As I stood behind the same counter where my grandfather had served his first customers, surrounded by 4 generations of employees and their families, I felt his presence and his approval. The industry response was overwhelmingly positive. Food and Wine magazine called it a masterclass in how to honor tradition while embracing social responsibility. The National Restaurant Association praised our commitment to values-driven leadership in an industry often focused only on the bottom line. Most importantly, our employee satisfaction scores reached an all-time high, our customer loyalty increased significantly, and we received applications from top culinary talent who wanted to be part of our mission. 6 months after the boardroom confrontation, Romano's Kitchen was thriving. Our legacy initiative had attracted positive media attention and new customers who appreciated our commitment to ethical business practices. We'd expanded into sustainable catering services and launched our retail sauce line, both of which exceeded projections. My relationship with my father had also strengthened considerably. Seeing me fight for Vincent's legacy had motivated him to become more involved in preserving family traditions, and he'd started working part-time at our original Brooklyn location, sharing stories about Vincent with newer employees. "I'm proud of you, Isabella," he told me during one of our weekly family dinners. "You've become the woman your mother and grandfather always knew you could be." Derek and Patricia had disappeared from New York entirely. I'd heard rumors that they'd moved to Florida, where Patricia was working in real estate and Derek was managing a small franchise restaurant. It seemed fitting that he'd ended up exactly where his lack of vision and integrity had always destined him to be. One evening, as I was working late in Vincent's office, I found myself looking at the photograph on his desk. The 3 of us together at my college graduation, Vincent beaming with pride, me grinning in my cap and gown, my future full of possibilities. I picked up the phone and called Thomas Morrison. "I want to establish the Vincent Romano Foundation," I told him, "for young people entering the culinary arts, especially those from immigrant families and underprivileged backgrounds. I want to provide scholarships, mentorships, and business support." "Vincent would love that," Thomas said warmly. He always believed in creating opportunities for others. As I hung up, I thought about the letter Vincent had left me, particularly his final words: "Now go show them what a Romano woman can do when she's been pushed too far." I had been pushed too far, and I had shown them. But more importantly, I'd shown myself. The uncertain young woman who had inherited a company was gone, replaced by a confident leader who understood her own strength and values. The betrayal had been painful, but it had also been transformative. Derek thought he was taking something from me, but instead, he'd given me the opportunity to prove that I belonged exactly where I was. Standing in Vincent's office, looking out at the city lights of Manhattan, I felt his presence and his approval. The company was safe, the legacy was secure, and the future was full of possibilities. Sometimes the people who try to destroy you end up being the ones who help you discover your true power. Derek had intended to steal my inheritance, but instead, he'd helped me claim my destiny. And that made all the pain worthwhile. 2 years had passed since the boardroom confrontation that changed everything. Romano's Kitchen now operated 52 locations across the East Coast, with our first West Coast restaurant opening in San Francisco next month. The Vincent Romano Foundation had awarded scholarships to 47 aspiring chefs, and 3 of our scholarship recipients were already working as sous chefs in our restaurants. I was reviewing expansion plans in my office when Elena knocked on the door. "Isabella, there's someone here to see you. He says it's about a business opportunity." The man who entered was impeccably dressed, with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to wealth. "Ms. Rodriguez, I'm James Hartford from Hartford Restaurant Group. I believe you know our portfolio." I did know them. They own some of the most prestigious restaurant chains in the country. "Mr. Hartford, what can I do for you?" He sat down without being invited, spreading papers across my desk. "We've been watching Romano's Kitchen's remarkable growth under your leadership. Your stock price has increased 340% since you took control, and your expansion strategy has been flawless." "Thank you, but I assume you're not here just to offer compliments." Hartford smiled.
Direct.
"I like that." "No, I'm here with an offer. Hartford Restaurant Group wants to acquire Romano's Kitchen for $180 million. That's more than double what your stepbrother was trying to get 2 years ago." The number was staggering. My 70% stake alone would be worth $126 million. But I thought of Vincent's hands teaching me to knead pasta dough, of the pride in his eyes when I successfully managed my first dinner rush, of his voice saying, "Money doesn't make you better than anyone, Isabella." "Mr. Hartford, Romano's Kitchen isn't for sale." His eyebrows rose. "Ms. Rodriguez, you're 26 years old. You could take this money, start fresh, maybe open a few boutique restaurants of your own. Why tie yourself to the responsibility of managing such a large operation?" "Because it's not just a business," I replied. "It's a legacy. It's about preserving something meaningful in an industry that's increasingly focused on profit over people." Hartford leaned back, studying me. "Your grandfather would be proud. But Isabella, may I call you Isabella? Sentiment doesn't pay the bills when the economy turns. The restaurant industry is brutal. One recession, one food safety incident, one shift in consumer preferences, and everything could disappear." I stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the Manhattan street where Vincent had once walked as a young immigrant with nothing but dreams and determination. "Mr. Hartford, my grandfather built this company through the Great Recession, multiple economic downturns, and countless industry changes. We've survived because we've never forgotten that we're in the business of bringing people together, not just making money." "That's admirable, but—" "The answer is no," I said firmly. "Romano's Kitchen will remain in the Romano family." After Hartford left, I found myself thinking about legacy and what it really meant. That evening, I called my father. "Dad, do you ever regret that Grandpa left the company to me instead of you?" There was a long pause. "Isabella, your grandfather made the right choice. I loved him, but I never had his vision or your passion. I'm proud to be your father and proud to see you carrying on his legacy in ways that even he might not have imagined." Chapter 16. Full Circle. The opening of our San Francisco location was a celebration of everything Romano's Kitchen represented. I had flown out personally to oversee the launch, and the response from food critics and customers exceeded our expectations. Walking through the dining room on opening night, watching families share meals and create memories, I felt Vincent's presence stronger than ever. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, was carefully twirling spaghetti on her fork while her grandmother showed her the proper technique. It could have been me and Vincent 30 years ago. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw the news about your San Francisco opening. Congratulations. You were right and I was wrong. Derek." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some bridges, once burned, were meant to stay that way. A week later, I was back in New York when Thomas Morrison called with news that would change everything again. "Isabella, I need to see you immediately. There's been a development you need to know about." His tone was serious enough that I canceled my afternoon meetings and went straight to his office. Thomas was waiting with a folder I'd never seen before. After Vincent's death, I was tasked with one final responsibility that I couldn't tell you about until now, he began. "Your grandfather left instructions that if you successfully defended the company against internal threats and proved your leadership capabilities, you were to receive this." He handed me a thick envelope sealed with red wax, Vincent's personal seal. Inside was a letter and a key. "My dearest Isabella," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means you've not only survived the challenges I knew would come, but you've thrived in spite of them. You've proven that you're not just my heir, but my successor in every way that matters." The letter continued, "There is one final gift I want to give you. The story of how Romano's Kitchen really began, and the foundation I've built for its future that goes far beyond what you know." The key, Vincent explained, opened a safety deposit box containing documents that would reveal the true scope of what he'd built. There were property investments, a network of supplier relationships that extended internationally, and most surprisingly, a 40% stake in a sustainable farming cooperative that supplied organic ingredients to restaurants across the country. "Your grandfather," Thomas explained as I read through the documents, "wasn't just a restaurateur. He was building an integrated food system that would ensure Romano's Kitchen could maintain its quality and values regardless of market conditions. The farming cooperative alone was worth $15 million, and the property investments added another $8 million to the company's hidden assets. Vincent had been quietly building a foundation that would make Romano's Kitchen virtually recession-proof. But the final document in the box took my breath away. It was a deed to a 50-acre property in Tuscany, Italy, where Vincent's grandmother had been born. He'd purchased it 5 years ago with the dream of opening a Romano's Kitchen location in the heart of his family's homeland. "He wanted you to have the choice," Thomas said softly, "to honor your Italian heritage while building the future of the company." That night, I sat in Vincent's office, my office, looking at photographs of the Tuscan property. Rolling hills, ancient olive groves, and a small villa that could be converted into Romano's Kitchen's first international location. I thought about the journey from that devastated 24-year-old who'd been betrayed by her family to the confident 26-year-old CEO who'd just been offered $180 million for her company and turned it down without hesitation. Vincent had been right about everything. The betrayal hadn't been a disaster. It had been a test. The challenges hadn't been obstacles. They had been opportunities to prove my strength. And the inheritance hadn't been just a business. It had been a calling. I picked up my phone and called Elena. "How would you feel about opening Romano's Kitchen Tuscany?" Her excited laughter told me everything I needed to know. Epilogue: The legacy lives on. 5 years after inheriting Romano's Kitchen, I stood in our newest location in the hills of Tuscany, watching the sunset paint the olive groves gold. Romano's Kitchen now operated 67 locations across 3 countries, employed over 2,000 people, and had been featured on the cover of Forbes as the restaurant empire that chose heart over profit. The Vincent Romano Foundation had grown beyond my wildest dreams, providing scholarships and mentorship to young chefs from immigrant families around the world. 3 of our scholarship recipients had gone on to open their own successful restaurants, each committed to the same values of quality, authenticity, and community that Vincent had instilled in me. My father had moved to Tuscany to help manage our Italian operations, finding peace in the connection to his heritage and purpose in preserving family traditions for future generations. Derek's text from years ago had been his last contact. I'd heard through industry connections that he'd found moderate success managing a small restaurant chain in Florida, finally learning to appreciate the business from the ground up. Patricia had apparently moved to Arizona and was selling real estate. I wished them well, but felt no need to reach out. As I walked through the Tuscan vineyards that now supplied wine exclusively to Romano's Kitchen locations, I thought about Vincent's words. "Money doesn't make you better than anyone, Isabella. It just gives you more responsibility to do good in the world." I had learned that true success wasn't measured in dollars or locations or industry awards, though we'd achieved all of those. True success was measured in the lives you touched, the traditions you preserved, and the legacy you built for future generations. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Maria Santos from our board of directors. "Isabella, I have someone I'd like you to meet. Her name is Sophia Chen. She's 22 years old, and she just graduated from culinary school. Her grandmother started a small Chinese-Italian fusion restaurant in Brooklyn 40 years ago, and Sophia has dreams of expanding it while honoring her family's traditions." I smiled. thinking of another young woman with big dreams and a family legacy to protect. Schedule a meeting. I'd love to hear her story. As I walked back toward the villa that had become both a restaurant and a symbol of dreams realized, I whispered a thank you to Vincent. He had given me more than a business or an inheritance. He had given me the knowledge that with determination, integrity, and the courage to fight for what you believe in, any challenge could become an opportunity. The people who had tried to steal my inheritance had actually helped me discover something far more valuable: my own strength, my true calling, and the unshakable knowledge that I was exactly where I belonged. Sometimes the greatest gift comes wrapped in the greatest challenge. And sometimes the people who try to destroy you end up being the ones who help you become who you were always meant to be. The Romano legacy was secure, but more importantly, it was growing. And that made every battle, every betrayal, and every moment of doubt worthwhile.